Hey there, and welcome to the People Who Help People podcast. This is the spot for HR and people ops pros who are all about building better businesses by putting people first. We chat with founders and experts who've been there, done that, and are generous enough to share what actually works. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hello again. Today I'm happy to be speaking with Jefferson Darrell, a marketing, communications, and change management leader and the CEO and founder of Breakfast Culture, an inclusive communications consultancy dedicated to unlocking the full potential of people at work. Through data and tech-informed culture assessments, inclusive leadership coaching, and purpose-driven storytelling, Jefferson helps organizations move beyond everything's fine to create workplaces where people feel genuinely valued, supported, and able to thrive. In this episode, when everything isn't fine, Jefferson and I discuss how small business owners can attempt to sell past this common leader refrain when employees' sentiment and data tell a different story. Welcome to the podcast, Jefferson.
Thank you for having me, Craig.
It's my pleasure. So, Jefferson, tell me about Breakfast Culture, how you got started, and about that logo that's on the wall behind you.
Oh, my little "Let's break some eggs" sign.
Let's break some eggs.
Yeah, that's our little tagline.
Okay.
It's all about eggs and all things eggy in the brand. Breakfast Culture started in 2017. It grew out of my own challenges in the PR space, moving into the C-suite, where I didn't see people who looked like me, specifically racialized peoples, in the C-suite in the public relations space, or frankly, a lot of women in an industry that's predominantly women. And so I went on a bit of a journey, just internally and educational wise, around change management, working with the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion and Centennial College, and created a process around change management for workplace cultures, and decided to put up my shingle in 2017, and that's how Breakfast Culture was born.
Terrific. So you were in PR, and yet you noticed an opportunity, a gap.
Correct.
We're selling to people, represent a diverse spectrum, but we as leaders are not as diverse ourselves, and one would expect that our messaging and how our employees feel is equally, there's an opportunity there as well. Did I capture that right?
Yes, I would say so. I mean, the analogy I like to use is a lot of organizations often look like a latte if you're a coffee drinker, or a pint of Guinness if you imbibe in alcohol. Basically very sort of white at the top and then a little darker down below, which is quite common in many organizations. We're hearing a lot these days about the concept of diversity. And I find it fascinating how some peoples are really talking about how diversity is not a strength or our strength. And I often think to myself, wow, do you have investments? Are all your investments in the exact same company or corporation? Or do you have a diversified portfolio with a whole bunch of different types of companies and organizations to increase your wealth, to increase, the ends and the results? And so with a more diverse company, and it's beyond just cosmetic diversity. By cosmetic, I mean black, white, male, female, gay, straight. Things like your introverts, your extroverts, your diversity of thought. And that's what I find fascinating in so many organizations is once you have this diversity of thought, your innovation is going to soar. I'm sure you've heard there's a very, I don't know if it's, I think the term is, I guess, an urban myth, but I have an Apple Watch, and apparently when they were making the Apple Watch, the entire team was all male. Again, I don't know if this is an urban myth, but I'd heard this story. And there was something because it monitors everything about your body. And I think there was a woman who bought it after the first original version and was like, well, why isn't this monitoring things like my menstrual cycle or whatever? And none of the men thought of that. They're like, oh, why? They didn't have to. In this case, again, I don't know if that's an urban myth or not, but it's a story I'm sure we've all heard. We've all heard similar stories. A concrete example, when I was working for a PR agency, we had a youth project And I found it interesting because the demographic was her intern, and she sat in the meeting and was a little, a little nervous and didn't really speak up. And I was like, Kieran, you're the demographic. You're the most important person in this meeting. And to go back to what we talk about around inclusive leadership, a lot of times when we look at leadership structures, they're very pyramid hierarchical. And I think we should be looking more circular, i.e., who has the skill that we need right now. And at that time, it was our intern who was in her early 20s, and that was the target demographic. So, I said, Kieran, please take the lead on this meeting. And she did. And it was her insights that came up with the big idea that the client loved. And we increased the sales for this organization. So that's where I go back to diversity. In this case, diversity of thought as well as cosmetic diversity.
I like that. I like the first time somebody's phrased it in terms of your portfolio is diverse. So certainly we should create an environment where diversity thrives. So one of the things, the premise of this conversation is we recognize that. We know diversity of thought's a good idea. And sometimes when we ask leaders, should we have a discussion about diversity? They reply, everything's fine. And yet if you go, to your point, a level or two below, those interns, those introverts, they'll tell you everything's not fine. So how do you bridge that gap? How do you start to bridge that gap between maybe a well-intentioned misperception that everything's fine and the reality on the ground?
Well, I would actually expand that to it's not just the interns. It can be your vice presidents, that token female, that token person of color, or what have you. In terms of bridging that gap, that's where we use the data. And that's one thing. Typically, our clients will come to us with one of four big buckets: issues of race, issues of gender, issues around sexual orientation, or issues of ability. Racism, sexism, queerphobia, ableism. And that's never the surprise. What I find interesting is through our process with our workplace culture assessment tool, we use technology and we talk to your people. One case study we have where we reduced attrition. It was an ad agency. I can speak very openly about this. They've agreed for me to do this. And they're based in a very large multi-ethnic metropolitan city. And they said, well, just looking at our staff, like we're 70% white, like why aren't we attracting any people of color? So when we engage them through our process, what I thought was fascinating, Craig, was the racial piece was not a surprise. Two other things that came out that were a surprise. Ageism. When you work in the ad space, that may not be such a surprise, but ageism was an issue in the organization they were completely blind to. The biggest one was 40% of their staff had a hidden disability, in this case, neurodiversity. Point of the story, Craig, is when you engage with our process, you might come to us for one reason. But what I find fascinating is there's always blind spots that aren't necessarily one of those four other common buckets. We talk a lot at Breakfast Culture about insider-outsider dynamics, meaning what is the insider dynamic within your organization? Looking at just the two of us today, let's say we started a company. We both wear glasses, and we might, whether we realize it or not, we only seem to hire people who wear glasses. So suddenly we're already just excluded a whole bunch of people in society just because they don't wear glasses. And then the people with contacts like, well, I still need something to correct my vision. Can I work there? And again, very simple oversimplification, but I think that's a great example of what I'm trying to talk about. So at the end of the day, what I find is our biggest unique selling proposition is we look at insider-outsider dynamics and we find those blind spots within more organizations. And that's one of the tools that we use to help get to, well, is everything fine? And here are some of the challenges. So often it's not just, as I said, the usual suspects. It's something they may be completely unaware.
I like that. I think that there's a reason why they're blind spots. We can't see them. And so it makes sense to ferret them out. But you use an assessment, your workplace culture assessment, to uncover those blind spots. Tell me a little bit more about the not only the assessment, but some of the success stories. You mentioned reduced attrition and improved hiring, and I've got to believe that an improved feeling of, belonging or feeling more inside when I used to feel more outside. Talk about some of the before and after.
So that example that I was talking about, they had, again, the organization, they were doing gangbusters. They grew from 100 to 300 employees within a year. And went from, those office sharing spaces to the president was building a brand new open concept, cool, funky advertising space. I guess they didn't really talk to their staff and they were putting that space together. And when we were talking to them about, just sense of belonging, and when 40% said, I'm on the neurodiversity spectrum, I can't handle open concept, like I need quiet when I work, I'm probably just going to leave when the new office comes up. And the CEO and the leadership team, they had no idea about this. And they were like, wow, you actually saved me half my employees, because now this affected how they were building this new office space to accommodate people who may not thrive in an open office environment. So that is exactly concrete how we help to reduce attrition. And what's interesting is they did not come to us for that reason. They came to us around issues of, racial equity, quite frankly. And that's what I love about our process. And when we work with organizations is, as I said, we often find that blind spot. And a lot of times it's not just about those stereotypical common aspects of insider outsider dynamics. So like race, gender, sexual orientation, ability. We're seeing a lot more around neurodiversity, for example. We're seeing a lot more, this is an interesting one, anti-fat bias in the workplace. I have a person on my team who talks quite a bit about that. I've learned so much from them. I attended a session around faith in the workplace, which is huge now with the rise of issues around Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, Christian nationalism. How are all these faiths interacting in the office? I mean, we talk very openly about different generations in the office, which feels like it's the one comfortable, for lack of a better phrase, area that we can talk about, but we don't talk about the others.
I've got to believe that's part of Let's Break Some Eggs.
Yes.
Is when people recognize we've got some opportunities to have a more open conversation and engage you. I think your team, I'm willing to bet your team does a very good job of breaking a few eggs and getting those conversations going. How do you do that? How do you do it? You're in the middle of a seminar and people don't exactly want to jump in and speak up. You could certainly share the data. You can share stories, but any other tips, things you found work well when you're breaking eggs? What's the recipe?
So a couple things on the Let's Break Some Eggs as a tagline. I'm going to indirectly answer your question, I guess, but not quite answer it. But breakfast culture comes from Peter Drucker quote. He's a famous management consultant. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I find when I say that, people are like, oh, I see the light bulb go off, and people are like, I get it now. I understand where it comes from. What a lot of people don't realize, two things. One, there's a second part to that quote. Culture eats technology for lunch, which I find interesting. And when I started using it, his foundation reached out to me to say, we're extremely honored that Peter Drucker was the inspiration for your company name. But just so you know, we're not really sure if he actually made that quote, even though it's attributed to him. And so to go back to the egg analogy, I think of my little eggy guy right here. And eggs, as you know, you can get brown eggs, you can get white eggs, you can get quail eggs, they come in all shapes, they come in all sizes, they come in all shades. Crack them open, most of them look like this, yellow yolk, and then the outside protein white. It's oversimplification, but same on the inside, different on the outside. Another aspect that I find interesting around the Let's Break Some Eggs analogy, and it's funny because I get this a lot from women. Sometimes when you look at dominant insider-outsider dynamics, dominant cultures, it can feel like you're walking on eggshells around dominant culture because we're so conditioned to code switch or mask for the comfort of, as a woman, the comfort of the men in the room, as a person of color, for the comfort of the white peoples in the room, as a person living with disabilities, for the comfort of the able-bodied peoples in the room. I could go on. And so that's when it's funny because I find almost every woman I speak with, they're like, oh, let's break some, like walking on eggshells when you're with a bunch of men. I was like, that's part of it, yes. So there's so much meaning in there as well.
I like those two. I'd say those are two analogies that are going to stick with me, and I appreciate that. I hope they stick with the listeners as well. I'm looking over your shoulder and I'm seeing, I think it's a light bulb or it's something under glass. There's a picture next to that light. Who's that?
Apologize for it. That's me with hair.
That's you with hair. Okay, there you go.
When I was in grade 2, I have a couple of portraits. For whatever reason, people painted me. I don't know why. One of my mother's colleagues, my mother was a school teacher, Evelyn Dunkel, painted that picture of me. Then I have another
Okay.
picture in my bedroom. My grandfather painted a picture of me around the same age, I think, either a year younger or older than that. But there's a picture of me that my grandfather painted that's hanging in my bedroom.
That's terrific. So why is that on your wall? Why do you hold on to that? To remember when you had hair? Well, certainly not.
I like the picture. I mean, it's a one of a kind. Obviously, no one else has it. It's me. This is a bit of a brag wall. So I have an award, the right up there. That's by a local Indigenous artist by the name of Patrick Hunter. It's the 2021 LGBTQ plus Business Advocate of the Year award. My degrees and whatnot are up there too. I have a couple of IABC Ovation awards, little things like that. And I'll be really honest, when I was putting it up there was a space and I wasn't sure what to do. I was keeping that painting, wasn't sure what to do with it. And we're looking, and it's like, oh, it kind of fits here. Well, let's just put it up here. So that's what we did.
Okay, I'll try to go with the theme of younger Jefferson. If you could talk to younger Jefferson
Ooh.
and let him know something that you've learned since that picture was painted, what would you say to him? I know there's got to be 1,000 things flooding in your head, but
Well, if it was
one or two
words, buy Apple stock now.
Okay, there you go.
That's 4 words. And no, in all seriousness, though, I have to really think about that one. I'm going to need some time to think about that one. That's a good question.
Okay.
Give me a bit more context in terms of what would I say to him now.
I got to imagine. How old were you when the picture was painted?
Oh, I was definitely under 10. I was probably grade 2.
What was his biggest hope? What was his biggest fear? How would you amplify how would you minimize his fear to maximize his hopes?
How much time do you have? It's funny. It's interesting that you say that because I do remember what happened around the time that painting was. It was to be honest, it was one of my first interactions with racism. I was physically assaulted at that age. I actually still have I have a little scar on my left temple. A bigger kid hit me across the head. That was one of my first interactions around racism. He called me F word, N word. And I didn't know what the F word meant, didn't know what the M word meant. I couldn't understand. Like, why did he hit me? I don't know. I had to get stitches, the whole bit. His school reached out and got my father. He was the first person, my first parent. Both my parents, my first parent on site. And what's interesting, Craig, is what has stuck with me all these years. And what is, I don't want to use the word haunted because it's may not be the right word to use, but what I've kept from that memory was the look on my father's face of frankly helplessness. I will not always be there to protect my child. But more importantly, the look on his face of how do I explain racism to a 7-year-old, a 6-year-old. I was either 6 or 7 at the time. And to go back to what I would tell that little boy, because I'm going to be brutally honest, no shame to admit this, but I'm going to admit it. I recognize that I suffered a lot from internalized racism growing up. And I say that as in when I look at the system, I say indoctrination in terms of the public education system, at least here in Canada. And I remember at that time, I found an essay that I wrote, a bit older, I'd say grade 4 by then. And I hated my name. I hated my name, Jefferson Darrell, and I wanted the name like Mark, something that was just the most bland, generic name. And I'm reading this, I got an A+. I hope it was for composition because I'm reading this now with my mindset. And I was like, I really had a lot of internalized racism as a kid. And not that I didn't like myself, but I was starting to have an awareness of that I was different.
Of course.
And I guess to answer your question directly, I'd probably tell myself, different is good.
Mm-hmm.
Be proud of your name, be proud of who you are. Because I love my name now. And people like, I meet people, it's like, wow, Jefferson, what a great name. Like, not Jeff, not Jeffrey,
Sure. Sure.
Jefferson. And I don't meet a lot of Jeffersons. Actually, I was in a store years ago and I saw some of the name J on his tag. It said Jepherson. Without skipping a bit, I was like, Jefferson. And he looks at me and he says, you are the first person to get that. I said, well, I'm also Jefferson, but with two F's instead of the PH. And then he laughed and we became friends. So I guess that's what I would tell myself is different is good. Unique is good. And it's what makes you, I mean, I know it's a bit, I'd come at something and not as trite and cliche, but it is what makes you special. And I recognize that today and I celebrate that today. So I guess that's what I would have told myself now that I think about it.
I think it was a great story and a great story to end on because it feels to me like that's what you're trying to say to the folks you work with. And I use folks intentionally because it's a broad spectrum, but different is good. Different's okay. Let's understand different. And let's bring some of those folks that feel outside inside so we can celebrate those differences and all feel more included in the place we work, the place we live, the people we get to live this life with. Jefferson, if somebody heard something today and they'd like to speak with you, reach out or engage, hopefully engage your services, how can they get in touch?
The website at breakfastculture.ca. You can email me directly. Are you ready for this? Let's break some eggs at breakfastculture.ca.
Okay.
That works. It's also just Jefferson at breakfastculture.ca. Both will get to me.
I will include both of those underneath the show notes. Jefferson, I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today, and I hope that others can take away some messages that they can share with, think about the younger versions of themselves, but share it with other young people in their lives, because I think that's important too. Thank you for this conversation, Jefferson, and you have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
Okay.